Well, hello and welcome to Art Adventures 2.
My name is Ro Adler, and I am the Associate Director of Youth and Family Programming at Fleischer Art Memorial. Who are you?
My name, Gerard Silva, o Gerardo Silva, como quieran. I do exhibitions and also community outreach.
And what we're going to do today is we're going to take you through the materials that have come in your Art Adventures materials kits. And we're going to show you a little bit about how to use them, how to care for them, and how to clean them up, and some more helpful tips and tricks.
And let's get started then. Yeah. This is not quite the size, but just imagine you're going to get a box like this, another one that's going to be slightly smaller. And the box is going to be full of materials for 20 students in each one. So let's start with the most basic one, which is?
Construction paper?
Oh. Sketch pad. Every kid is going to get a sketch pad. These are 9 by 12, it's the size. And the great thing about this one is a multimedia or mixed media use. What does that mean?
That means that you can use dry media like pencils and oil pastels with no problem, and you can also use wet media like watercolors and paint on this paper, and it'll hold it all.
And you can also do collage. You can really use this for everything. This is why we chose this mixed media pad. And if you want this to last even longer, one thing to do is that you can tell the students to either cut the page if they want to. They can use the back of the page as well. Completely up to them.
And what we'd recommend is definitely take some time to label the front of each notebook with your kids' names. And if you have a storage space in whatever room you're using, it's probably a good idea to store them on site so that kids can use them day to day.
Yeah, remind them to bring them back to school, of course, or to wherever you are. Next, we have pencils. I think we all know what a pencil is. Everyone's going to get a pencil, and everyone's going to get a pen. We don't have the pen here with us, but I think you can imagine what a pen looks like. Yeah. The one thing with the pen is going to be a fine line pen. Why is that? Do we know? Yes.
For
comic books.
Yes, details in comic books, really good to use a fine line pen.
Exactly. We didn't go with the Sharpie because Sharpie is a little bit too permanent, and I know that it can stain, and especially the kids love to do it in their skin. So we went with something more like a regular fine line pen.
And something to remember about the pencils is that there are going to be some projects that you might encounter where you're using a pencil as a carving tool into foam, or where you're using the eraser as a printing tool. And just remember to sharpen the pencil anytime you want to use it. And if you get some paint on the eraser, that's fine. You can always wipe it off, and then it should work just fine for you.
And that brings me to, eraser. Since you're talking about it, I think we know what this does, but just in case, you're going to erase with it.
Pretty simple.
Yeah. Everyone's getting one. And the other thing you're going to get are pencils. Now, the color pencils, I should have mentioned they're different colors. They're going to come in a big box. And the box is going to look something like, let me just show you something like it. This is not it, but it's going to look something like this. So that means that there's going to be a lot of pencils in here, and the kids can actually share the pencils. So just keep that in mind. Also, many colors in there, which is the reason why we went with the box instead of with these individual ones.
Would you recommend that they split their boxes into individual kits, or do you think the kids should put their pencils back in the box?
That's actually a good question. I think we should leave that to the providers, however they feel. If they feel that the kids won't return the stuff the next day, maybe you should keep it all in the box. And that way you for sure are guaranteed you're going to have this again for the next day. Another thing to really keep in mind is that these materials, you're going to be using this through the whole of the 5 weeks. So perhaps you don't want kids to go through something way too quickly. So you want them to last until the last class, right?
Right, and if you're following the schedule that we've laid out, which is, of course, up to you, what we've done is we've scheduled earlier on the projects that are a little bit more materials intensive. And that way, when you get sort of more towards the end of the summer, you're using up a lot more of your materials, you'll be left with projects that will use materials that you still have, simple things like your notebook, pencils, and erasers. Another thing to remember about colored pencils is they don't erase that well.
Very true. So just tell your kids if they're not sure of the color, just go very light first with the color. When they're sure, hey, go all the way. So that brings me to markers. I think we should talk about markers. And again, you're gonna get a box like this of markers. That means that you can either give each kid a set of markers, or you can just tell them, hey, return the markers so you have them tomorrow. And they're gonna look something like this, and they're gonna be many, many colors. And I would suggest that you don't use the markers right away. You start with pencils, you start with very fine lines, tell them not to press too hard at first. That way you can erase a lot easier. And of course, when you have the design, when everything's ready to go, hey, use the markers, go for it.
Are these markers washable?
They are definitely kid-friendly and washable. So, you know, how's that works? Because I've never actually tried to wash my marker from myself. Have you?
What I would say is, same with the paint, and we'll talk about the acrylic paint a little bit later. If you do get marker on or paint on your clothes, take it to wash in some cold water as soon as you can. That'll increase your chances that you'll get it out fully. With the markers, a little bit less so, but with the acrylic paint, if you let it dry, it's kind of in there permanently. And we'll talk more about that. One more thing about the markers, Gerard, can you hand me that one?
Of course.
One more thing about markers is you want to be sure that they are capped securely. You'll hear that nice click. You can even have some of the younger kids.
That was too bright for me. I might need to wear glasses for that.
You ready? You ready? So you're going to want to make sure these are capped securely, because otherwise they'll dry out. And what I'd recommend, if you have younger kids who are maybe not as used to these materials, you can all practice together capping and uncapping. It's actually can be kind of hard. It uses more force than you would think. So you're definitely going to want to check out your markers at the end of the day and make sure that they're all securely capped so they don't dry out.
And you might be an artist like me who doesn't mind having color all over my face or my body. I'm okay with that. So if you have that kind of artist, it's okay. So now we're gonna talk about the oil pastels. Again, you're gonna get a box like this, very similar to this. But for this video, we're gonna show you what the oil pastels look like. And how would you describe these?
Oil pastels are like crayons, but they're a little bit softer. They're super waxy. And I love them because the colors are so bright, and they're really easy to hold and manipulate, especially for the younger kids. A lot of our artists who have mixed media or painting projects have incorporated the oil pastels with watercolor, because what happens is if you lay down some oil pastel and then you paint watercolor over it, the oil pastel pushes the watercolors away, so you get some pops of really vibrant color underneath your watercolor painting.
Wow, that's a really good tip. And, you know, your kids are going to love this because, you know, if they like Crayolas, they're going to love this. It's a step above that. You know, it's the next step as an artist, serious artist.
And one thing I would say about oil pastels is that they get worn down really quickly. So you might be surprised that you'll have a full oil pastel at the beginning of class, and at the end, there will be no more oil pastel. It'll all be on the paper.
And with this one, I really would recommend them for the kids to return the pastels to the box so you have them for the next day. It really makes sense with the pastels, I think.
Oil pastels can get a little bit messy. Your hands might get a little bit stained with some oily color, but it comes off nice and easy with soapy water.
Should I try and you? Okay, maybe
no
not.
Thanks.
Don't encourage that with your kids. So let's move on to the paint. So each box is gonna get one of these. What is this? These are acrylic paints, and they're gonna come, these are the basic colors. So you get a red, you get a blue, you get a yellow, there's black, there is white. How do they work?
Well, these are acrylic paints, which means that you can thin them out with water, which is really cool. There are some brilliant, beautiful colors, and you might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, where's the green, where's the orange, where's the purple? Here's where they are. Blue and yellow together make?
Brown.
No. Blue and yellow make green. yellow and red together make?
Green, no, orange, really, sorry, I did, I do have a degree.
And red and blue together make purple.
Purple.
So when you're mixing colors, or when your students are mixing colors, it's a good idea to start with the lighter color and then mix in small amounts of the darker color bit by bit. That way you won't use up a ton of paint trying to get the color that you want. Something else to remember about these acrylic paints is that they will stain clothes if they dry. So if any of your students or you notice that they have some paint on their clothing, just take them over to a sink, wash in some cold water, and you should be good.
And that actually brings me to a really good point that maybe you should remind the kids not to wear their nice clothing. You know, I never do for when I'm painting. I always wear whatever, you know.
No tuxedos,
No tuxedos.
And prom dresses at summer camp this year.
And the other things, you know, with white, you can definitely make colors lighter. And of course, with black, you can make them darker. Another thing about this is that you're going to be using this quite a bit for many different lessons. So you want to be a little bit modest with the amount you give each kid. And what do you recommend for amounts?
I would say maybe start with a quarter-sized amount of paint. You can always give more, but you can't really put it back in the bottle once it's out.
So true. And the way that you can actually use these paints is because we're providing you with a palette pad.
So you've got a couple options for doling out paint. One of them is this palette pad, like Gerard said. I love these. I'm a painter, and I love to use these. Each box is going to get one palette pad. There's 50 pages in here, but what you can do is you can divide them in half so kids have a little bit of a smaller piece. And what this is basically, it's water-resistant paper. So you can put paint on here. It's not going to absorb into the paper. And then your students can use their paintbrush to mix colors on this palette. So if they want to make one of those beautiful oranges or greens or purples, or they want to add some white to brighten up some colors, they can do it all on the palette paper before they paint it on their page.
What if I don't like the palette?
Well, if you don't like the palette paper, you can use a Dixie cup, you can use any kind of disposable plate or cup, and the nice thing about that is you can put saran wrap over them and they won't dry for a little while, like definitely overnight they won't dry.
Overnight, you can use them the next day. So that's another way to give this to the kids. And of course, you're getting brushes with this. And as we know, brushes is how you distribute the paint in the paper or whatever you're doing, because there can be many different lessons. It might be, what else? They might use it for printing. That's one way they might use the brushes. So you're getting a set of brushes as well as, and different sizes as well. And you're also going to get watercolors, and the watercolor set comes with the brush itself. So
does each kid get a set?
Each kid gets a set of these.
So that's another place that you can choose, if it makes sense to label with a kid's name, you can put some masking tape on there, write their name, and they can keep it consistent day to day, or you don't have to do that. One thing to remember about watercolors is that if some of these lighter colors, like the yellow, if they get stained because kids are mixing into them, you can always wipe them off with a wet cloth or a wet paper towel, and they should be good to go.
That's a great suggestion. You should always tell the kids not to mix colors or the brushes. Always dip it first in water and then come back to the color. Also, if you have any rags or maybe paper on the side, that's usually how I work with my watercolors. I always dry it first and then go into the good paper.
Paper towels are your friend.
I love paper towels.
So let's talk about brush care. What are some of the things that people should remember when they're using brushes?
Yeah, to wash them. You need to wash them. This is so crucial. So you can use brushes through the whole 5 weeks of this program. If you don't wash them, they're going to get really, really, what you call tough, and they will move, and they really won't work. So also, it's really good to tell the kids, clean your stuff.
Yeah, especially if you're using the acrylic paint and it dries out on the brush, that brush is pretty hard to rescue.
So now we're just going to show you how to use the acrylic paint. So let's start. This is not what you're getting, but we're just going to put a little bit in here. How about that? Just to show.
So we've got a small dab on the palette paper. And let's see. I've got a jar of water here. You can use cups. It's nice to have one of these on every table. Not every kid needs one, but it's really good to have water so that you can change colors and you can clean your brush. So a nice thing about acrylic paint is that it mixes well with water, so you can actually thin it out the more water that you use and get a little bit more of a transparent color. This, like we said, on this palette paper is where your kids can mix colors. This is how you can distribute colors out to your kids. And when you want to clean the brushes or you want to change colors, what do?
Go back in the water.
Take it in the water. You want to use a little bit of pressure on the bottom and the sides of the cup to kind of get the paint out of those bristles. And then, let's see, I'll do it a little bit more. You should see a pretty clean brush. This one had red bristles already, so that's why it looks red. And then you're kind of good to go. You can either put this in a cup to dry standing up, or you can use it to mix another color. We don't want to leave these brushes covered in paint to dry, and we also don't want to leave them in a cup of water. Even if they're clean, if you leave them in a cup of water for too long, they'll start to fall apart.
And always put them upright. So this part always going up. And here's a good example. You get paint on you no matter what. So just tell your kid to wear those clothes that they don't care about.
And that should wash right off your hand
really
jar,
should.
don't worry.
So always have a rag or paper towel near you because you are definitely gonna need it. So next, we talked about the watercolors already, and I just wanted to mention again the watercolors, you're gonna need some water. Right next to it too, maybe every kid can get a cup, and that would be awesome. And the thing about watercolors, like they just work with water, and they're really easy to work. I think they're easy, so people think they're difficult. What do you think of watercolors?
I like watercolors. I think they're really different from acrylic paint because most of the colors that you're going to get from this kind of paint are a little bit more see-through. They're a little bit lighter, and you can actually layer colors on top of each other. You can mix colors pretty easily, either on this plastic part of the palette. If you open it up, oh, it's taped. If you open this up, you can use this plastic part of the palette to mix watercolors. And just like with the acrylic paint, you're gonna wanna encourage your students to wash the brush off really well between colors. Otherwise, these paint wells will get kind of messy.
So now we're gonna discuss the felt. So each box will get this variety of felt, and as well as construction paper, which we don't have here with us, but you know what construction paper looks like, and it will also come in a pack like this with different colors. The construction paper, something I need to mention, it's going to be actually quite large. I believe it's 18 inches long, so I definitely want you to tell the kids to cut it and to really use it wisely, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, construction paper is very absorbent, so it's not as good for what we call wet media, like paint and watercolor. It's good for oil pastels, it's good for markers, but what we have most of our projects using it for is collage, and it's really great for tearing, cutting, gluing. And something to keep in mind about construction paper is that if a scrap is big enough, you should save it because someone's gonna be able to use it for a collage the next day.
And the same thing with the felt. Don't throw away anything. Just keep everything because you probably can use it for another project. And the good thing at Fleischer, we have a lot of fiber artists, and we're gonna be having a lesson just on these, and as well as thread. You're also gonna be doing thread. It's not gonna come, it will be, we all know how thread looks like. You're gonna be getting something not quite like this, but each box will get a kit with many, many different colors, and also a lacing needle. The needle will be plastic, so you don't have to worry about kids, stabbing each other, which I know that would never happen. But just in case, be careful. They're still needles, so, right?
It's definitely worth, at the beginning of your first project where you use lacing needles, reminding kids that they are sharp, that they can hurt, and you can even practice together, always pointing the sharp part away from a kid's face, keep it away from eyes, and it should be totally fine. Something else to remember about embroidery thread is it can get tangled pretty easily. That's
Really?
kind of part of using that material. But what I would suggest is not giving kids a piece that's too long. That will help them keep it from tangling up. And you can always, if a kid wants to make their piece longer, you can help them tie a little knot and extend the piece. But if you start giving out pieces that are too long, they might get tangled, and that can be pretty frustrating.
Unless you love untangling, which actually I do.
Oh, you should come over to my house and work on some of my extension cords.
But you're so right. It gets tangled so quickly. So just be advised about that. But our artists are definitely going to tell you more about that, and they will discuss in detail how to use the needle, how to use the thread as well. And now we can move into the glue. So each box will get a glue gallon, maybe, or you might be getting glue like this. So either way, it's going to be glue, and glue can be used for many different purposes. If you get the gallon, the best way to do this is with egg cartons, right, or the Dixie cups. Or what else would you suggest? The plates. The plates will work well. And the glue will be used for many different lessons. Collages, again. And heaven only knows what else our instructors are making up right now. Do you have any other thing to say about the glue?
Well, when you have it in a big gallon container like this, it's obviously a little bit different, a little bit harder for kids to use than if you have it in these individual squeeze bottles over here. I think we all pretty much know how to use these. You scrape off the dried part at the top, you untwist it a little bit, and then the kids use their hands to squeeze out the glue. With these, it's going to be a little bit more like painting, actually. So what you're going to want to do is dispense this glue into a smaller container, like Gerard said, an egg carton, a cup, a disposable plate, and then use a brush to paint on a little bit of glue onto whatever the kids are gluing. A little bit goes a long way with this. Once you have affixed the two pieces together, it will probably need to dry for a while. The more glue that's on there, the longer it's going to need to dry. So especially with the felt, resist the temptation to pick them up, to move things around, because they really need to set for a while. And just like with the acrylic paint, if you do use a paintbrush with glue, it's really important to wash it out with water before it dries, because otherwise that paintbrush is just going to become a glue stick.
Completely ruined. One thing to keep in mind is this is safe, non-toxic, and it's also washable. So usually not all glues are made this way, but the ones you're getting will be that. So each box you're getting is going to get additional tools, and some of those tools are going to be, let's start with the ruler. What to do with the ruler? Measure things. What else?
Straight edge.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, especially for later in the summer when we have some comics workshops. These are going to be so helpful for your kids. You lay them down on the page, take a pencil along the side, draw a perfectly straight line.
Well, maybe your kid is just like me. I like to my canvas to always use a ruler, everything I do, so I love rulers. And then you're gonna get, and you get one too, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah, we each get scissors. So obviously you know what that does, and just be safe, that's the one thing.
Yeah, we've gotten you scissors that have a pretty blunt tip, so it would be pretty hard to hurt oneself with this, but
still good to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basic scissor safety, it's really good to carry scissors. If you're moving from one part of the room to another, it's good to carry them holding the blade like this. Never point scissors at someone's eyes, and
no cutting hair.
No cutting hair unless, I don't know, you have some aspiring barbers and you have parental permission.
Yeah, exactly, there you go. And each box is also gonna get masking tape. And masking tape is actually, it's a tool that we don't think much about, but it's amazing because especially when you're tracing, which you might be doing some tracing, or maybe when you're doing the comic books. And what else would you use? Actually for collage as well. Sometimes you want to position things to see how they're gonna look before you actually place it with the glue. So there's many uses for these. So each box will get one of these.
A lot of our teaching artists have the students place tape down over the paper and then not completely covering the paper, but in a pattern of lines and shapes. And then you paint over it, and when the paint is completely dry, pull up the tape, and it leaves this really cool white space underneath.
And there's one more material that we want to talk about, and that is the Model Magic. And you probably all know what this does. You're gonna get it so you might get it this way, where there's 75 packs of 1 ounce Model Magic, or you might get a bucket, depending. We were trying to source all these materials from many different places because not everyone had the availability of the materials, so we were trying to get what we could.
Model Magic is a really cool material. It's basically a quick drying, air dry clay. So once you open this packet, you've got, 4 hours?
4 hours at the most.
4 hours before everything inside it dries, unless you want to put it in a little plastic bag and seal it up really tight afterwards. That's the only way that you might be able to use it again later. But so when you open these packages, that's the time to do the project because it's going to dry out. And these are really cool because you don't need any special tools to manipulate it or to bake it. Nothing like that. You just leave it out and it'll dry. And once it's dry, you can paint on it, you can color on it. So these are really good for making little sculptures. You can make it into sort of a pancake, and you can squish things into it, pull them up, and have made a pattern. There's lots of things you can do with this, but the important thing to remember is it dries really fast.
So just think of it as friendly clay. And the other thing, if you get the bucket instead of the packets, the same thing goes. Make sure you seal that bucket every day. Otherwise, it's going to dry and the whole thing is going to get ruined. So we have other materials we want to talk about that we don't have with us yet. One of them is the scratch foam board. Scratch foam board is going to be for printing purposes, and the instructor will definitely guide you through that. The one thing is going to be 9 by 12, the size of it, and what I do recommend, so it's going to be like this size, what I do recommend is that the kids do cut it in 4. So in the middle, and again in the middle, that way you'll have 4 different plates to play with. Anything else you want to say about scratch foam board?
Yeah, something that is a little bit surprising is that whatever you scratch into a foam board, when you print it, and our teaching artists are going to show you how to print it, but when you print it, it's going to print that image backwards. So this is really good to remember when you're writing letters or numbers or anything where it matters which side you're looking at it. You might want to spend a little time working out your design and making sure that when it's completely reversed, you can still tell what it is.
And actually, that's a great point. This is why you get the sketch pad. So I always tell my kids, hey, before you go all the way, do a sketch. Try it out first, see how it looks, and then go into maybe another piece of paper where you do the final project. So always encourage your kids to always do a draft.
And these mixed media pads have a lot of pages in them, so hopefully your kids can use them for the whole summer, and then at the end of the summer they'll have an incredible archive of all of the amazing art that they've done.
And the only other item that we haven't talked about is popsicle sticks, or also known as craft sticks, also known as many, many other things, lollipop, I don't know. And we all know what that does, and there's many ways you can use them, and the instructors will be guiding you and telling you how we're going to use them for the different lessons. Do you know anything about one way we might be using them?
Yeah, so one of our teaching artists, Marie Elson, made a craft called Ojos de Dios. And they're basically 2 popsicle sticks that are taped or tied together in an X like this, and then using that embroidery thread that also comes in your box, it's woven around the popsicle sticks wider and wider, and it makes this beautiful, colorful, kind of hypnotic
Ooh, I like it.
diamond thread pattern.
And that's another thing to keep in mind, you can do this work with your kids. Do it yourself if you want to join in. It's fun. And another thing that I want to let you know is that the 2 of us are here to always help. So if you have any questions, our emails are going to be displayed, and please make sure you ask the questions.
We hope you have so much fun with your students this summer. We hope that you enjoy the materials and yeah, have an art adventure.
Please do. I'll see you next time.
Hi, my name is Ro Adler, and I am the Associate Director for Youth and Family Programming at Fleischer Art Memorial. And I'm here to give you some tips and tricks for how to interact with kids while they're making art and help you feel ready to make some amazing art with your students this summer. So the first and most important tip that I like to give to adults who are working with kids while they're making art is to never draw on a kid's work for them. And even if a kid asks you for help drawing something or cutting or painting or doing any steps of this project, take a moment to think about whether that frustration would actually be helpful for them in learning. Because some of the times when kids push through frustration and get to the next step, that's when the most exciting learning and the most exciting art happens. Something else that's really important for kids while they're making art is to emphasize that what you're interested in is what's in their brains and what's in their imagination. So we don't want to necessarily give kids something to copy exactly, because then we're not giving them an opportunity to really see what they're thinking and see what magical creatures are living in their imagination. So we try not to give examples of how to draw something, or we like to give lots of examples to let kids know that what we're really interested in seeing is their ideas. One of our teaching artists even says that you can draw any characters as long as they don't exist already. So no Spider-Man, no Wonder Woman, just the things that are coming out of your kids' brains, and that's what we really want to see. The best art projects, in my opinions, are the ones where we give kids materials, we teach them how to use them, and then they can use the materials that they've learned how to manipulate to express the ideas that are in their own minds. When you're working with kids and they're making art, you're gonna want to deliver a lot of praise, because that shows that you're paying attention to what they're doing and that you're excited by it and that they're on the right track. But not all praise is equal. There's some ways of talking about a kid's work that can really help them continue being creative, continue pushing their boundaries, and continue learning. And there's other kinds of praise that can be a little bit confusing or maybe even a little bit distracting for kids. Some examples of praise that I think are really helpful for kids is when you make enthusiastic observations about what they're doing. Like, wow, I noticed you chose a really bright color blue for that. And then you can let the kids express their own excitement and their own feelings of success, rather than saying, hey, that looks really good. When you say something looks really good, or a kid is doing a really good job, what you're actually sometimes doing is letting kids know that you think there's a right way and a wrong way to do something. And when we're making art together, we really want to celebrate mistakes, we want to celebrate variety, and we want to make sure kids know that there's no right or wrong way to make art. Actually, there's no wrong way to make art. There's only expressing what you have in your own mind. Noticing hard work and effort, so complimenting a kid on, wow, I see that you worked really hard on this for a long time, or did you make what you felt like was a mistake there and then you turned it into something really beautiful? Those can be really exciting ways to receive praise as a kid, because what you hear as a child is, I'm being rewarded for my effort and for trying, and that's going to help create lifelong learners out of kids. So we really want to praise kids' work, kids' perseverance, kids' ability to make mistakes and then make beauty out of them, kids' ability to keep trying. Those are the things that we really like to encourage in all educational settings, but especially when we're making art. Everyone is an artist. Even you are an artist. Even if you don't feel like you're an artist, even if you've never taken an art class or you've never picked up a paintbrush, you are an artist too. And this is something we want to make sure kids hear that a lot, because actually from a really young age, a lot of kids start to believe that they're not good at art or that it's not their thing. And that's when they start limiting their own creativity, when they start losing interest. And a way that you can really help kids keep their identity as an artist alive is by emphasizing that everyone can make art, that all art is valuable, and that the most important thing when you're making art is to have fun, is to celebrate your successes and your challenges and your growth. Making mistakes is a huge part of the process, even and especially for adult artists. So when your kids make a mistake, try to encourage them not to crumple up their paper and start something new. Try to look with them for the things that are beautiful and exciting and surprising about what they've done, and then go from there to make something new. This is a process that a lot of adult artists use too. And it's really good to remember that there is no perfect art piece. A lot of the times kids get caught up because they feel like their art needs to be really perfect, needs to be neat and clean and look like the example. But that's not actually the important part about art making. The important part about art making is your growth, your persistence, your exploration, and your joy. The most important thing to remember when you're making art is that it should be fun, first and foremost. One of our teaching artists said this to me, and I really think it's a smart idea to remember that you should smile while you're making art. And if you're not smiling, try something else.